Furiosa, the new film by George Miller, the director of Happy Feet and Babe 2, Pig in the City.
Well, that was a movie.
Hello and welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm giving my first thoughts on Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. So in case you didn't pick up from that subtitle, it is from the Mad Max universe, although Mad Max is not the main character in this. Instead, you've got Furiosa, who was a side character in Mad Max Fury Road, played by Charlize Theron, now being played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Normally at the beginning of these videos, if I know I'm going to spend the rest of the time saying mean things, I try to say something nice. I tried to start with something nice. Soften the blow a little bit. So I thought the sound mixing was decent. So, backing up to the other Mad Maxes, mainly just Mad Max Fury Road, because both Mad Max Fury Road and this one feel pretty disconnected from the other Mad Maxes. Mad Max Fury Road took the franchise and tried to, modernize it a little bit. It was no longer in the 80s and the late 70s where there was cheesy, silly stuff happening all the time. It was a much more self-serious, much more cool version of those kind of movies, and I enjoyed Mad Max Fury Road. I didn't love it as much as everybody else did, but I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great. People are like, oh, it's the greatest action movie of all time. And I was like, based on what? The plot? There isn't one. But I thought there was some cool characters. I thought there was good action. And I thought the score was good. I thought it looked cool. Overall, it was a good, not great movie. This one, subtract the cool characters, subtract the good action, subtract it looking good because the CGI was terrible. It also had some of the worst editing I have ever seen in a major blockbuster movie, and you get Furiosa. A lot of the first one rides on the charisma of the leads. Tom Hardy, Charlize Theron, both very good actors. I know Tom Hardy doesn't really talk at all, but he's able to be like that cool man without a name type character, even though he's obviously Mad Max. We have that kind of, like I said, Clint Eastwood man without a name kind of character, and he pulls that off because he has just so much natural charisma in his character. Also, the villain looks really cool. Honestly, one of my biggest regrets about that movie is we don't get to see more of him. I really enjoy that character and wanted to see more of him. So when this movie was a prequel, I got excited because we got to see more of him, and I wish we didn't. Not that they ruined the character, but they didn't do anything more with him, and so it just kind of solidified him as an underutilized character, and that's frustrating. But also, you replace Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron with Anya Taylor-Joy, who's not necessarily a bad actor or anything, but doesn't have the charisma. Once again, they tried to make her into this man without a name, but I guess woman without a name, who doesn't talk and is just a badass, but she doesn't pull that off. She can't really seem to pull that off. Also, what happened in between this movie and the next movie, they seem pretty fluid together, where then she starts talking more. Also, why doesn't she talk in this? It's not like there's a mystery as there was with Mad Max, where you're like, oh, this guy's mysterious. I wonder who he is, where he came from, why won't he talk? In this, it's just nothing. It seems like a gimmick. You already know the character. You see her since she's a child. A lot of, like, the first hour of this movie, she's a child, and it's like, you know who she is. You've seen her. You see where she comes from, you see where she goes. Cotton Eye Joe, she's not cool. We know who she is, and she can't really pull off this deep, mysterious character when we saw her as a kid, And then Chris Hemsworth famously is the bad guy in this, and he's probably the best thing about the movie, honestly. He's cheesy, he's over the top, but that kind of fits the style of this movie, because as much as the Mad Max Fury Road took itself really seriously, this one reverts back in a lot of ways to that cheesy 80s style, and everything is silly in this movie, especially when Furiosa is a child. There's action scenes, if you've seen the Kenobi series, and there's a couple of action scenes where Leia, as an infant, is running around being chased by bad guys, and they're very clearly, it's like a kid's show. That's how this felt too. Some really silly action stuff, really silly moments where I couldn't take it seriously at all, and it's like, how is this related to Mad Max Fury Road? That movie, yes, it's kind of silly at times, you've got that guy hanging on wires playing an electric guitar. Silly in like an adult way. This is silly in a childish way. That's two very different things. And I couldn't take this movie seriously for a vast majority of it. When she becomes an adult, it gets a little bit more serious, but it's still a bad and boring movie. For instance, when she's a kid, she decides she's going to run away at a certain point in this movie. And she shaves her head, and then we cut into the future, and now she's pretending to be a guy. And then it gets revealed her hat gets taken off, so she got long flowing hair. I was like, oh, it's a girl. And it's like, okay, why did she let her hair grow out if she's pretending to be a guy? She could have just kept shaving it. That's just silly. That doesn't make any sense. That's stupid. That's bad writing. Also, none of the characters are interesting. I know we're supposed to find her, interesting and likable and care about her because of her past, but I was more interested in Hemsworth's character because he was just more interesting. Was he a good character? Not really, but the portrayal was something interesting. Frankly, it reminded me of Jim Carrey in Bad Batch, and it really felt like this movie was written for Jim Carrey to be this role. Chris Hemsworth didn't do as well as I think Jim Carrey would have done in the role, but he did well enough that I didn't hate him, whereas most of the cast, at least the leads, there was a lot of character actors all around that were really good, but the leads were boring and bland. There was a guy, I don't know his name, not good, and then Furiosa wasn't good. And like I said, you bring back other characters from other movies and you just like, why bother? They're not interesting or doing anything cool, so it's kind of a letdown. And like I said, the editing was god awful. There's so many just fade to blacks that just like, why did we do that? Weird transitions. Also, just a mind-numbing amount of speeding up, fast forwarding. Like, it looked so many times like a silent era film, because there was the lower frame rate back then and they would speed it up so it would look fast and kind of choppy and stuff. That's what they did constantly throughout this movie, sometimes during action sequences to kind of cover some bad action or acting or whatever. But also, I think a lot of times they were afraid of the people driving. The people weren't driving at full speed, so they wanted to speed it up. However, the actors then had to act slower, and then but they didn't, so then they were acting in fast motion. And there was one part in particular that just is jumping to mind, where Chris Hemsworth sits down on his car as these bikers are circling around, and he's just like chewing on something as it's doing a slow push in on him. So the push must have been really slow because they sped it up, and it's just like, yeah, I really needed to see Chris Hemsworth going, like, how was this such an oversight that they did this, like, constantly throughout the movie? So many times they were speeding everything up, and it was just painful and bad. And in Mad Max Fury Road, they bragged about how much was practically done, like they did it for real with the car chases and the action stuff, the explosions, and it looks good. It does. This, I don't know if they didn't have the budget or whatever. They used a lot of CGI, and not only did they use a lot of CGI, it was a lot of really, really bad CGI, like low budget or rushed or something. It looked terrible. This movie looks nowhere near as good as the other one did, which came out like a decade ago or something. Not quite, but close to it. And my goodness, how does this movie look so much worse than that movie that is significantly older than it looks? It's just budget or CGI or something. It looks dramatically worse. And speaking of editing, I guess I'm getting into spoilers now, because if you care, you probably already left if you want me to say this movie's good. It's not. I'm giving it a 4, I think, out of 10. Not a fan, not good. So spoilers now. But there's a point in time when, and I guess you could argue it's not the point of the story or whatever, but there's this narrator that pops in and out at times. This movie's 2.5 hours long. It's just so long and boring. And this narrator pops in and he goes, there have been wars throughout the years, and some are 6 days, some are 100 years, you never know. Well, this one was 40 days in the desert. And you're like, okay, cool. Are we gonna get to see that? Nope, we don't get to see any of it, really. There's like a really quick montage. You see the guitar guy for 1 second, and that's it. And it's like, why are you telling us about a 40-day war if you're not gonna show it to us? Furiosa wasn't involved, so I get, like, okay, we care just about her and what she's trying to do. She's trying to kill Chris Hemsworth, and that didn't happen in these scenes, but that would have been cool. This movie's a big action blockbuster, right? It's got a terrible story, so you're leaning on the action, right? Well, you're not going to even show what could have been the biggest, coolest action sequence in the whole movie, because the action in this movie is not good. It's very silly. It's bad, except for maybe 1 or 2 moments. There's overall 1 or 2 cool moments in this movie, but for the most part, it's bad. And yeah, so we just skip right over that. And it's like, well, why? Dude, I wanted to see that. In that moment that I was talking about where Chris Hemsworth is chewing and fast forward, what they're doing is they've captured the 2 main good guys, Furiosa and Joe Schmo, I don't know his name. And so they've got her dangling by her arm from a chain, and they've got him being dragged behind a motorcycle. Meanwhile, you've got the whole caravan of bad guys circling the truck that she's attached to and Hemsworth is sitting on, circling for hours and hours and hours. It's like it's middle of the day, and now it's late afternoon, starting to like become dusk. And he goes, all right, that's enough. And he goes around, and her arm is dangling there, but she's not there. So she cut her arm off somehow without having a knife or anything. We don't see what she does. Breaks her arm off and runs away. But she's being circled by bikers this whole time, and there's bad guys everywhere, and we don't see her escape. We're just like, isn't she so cool? She got away. And it's like, no, this is stupid. This is such a convenient writing thing, is, oh, if we don't show it, we have to assume she was really badass and did something really cool to get away. No, it's lame. It's awful. And yeah, okay, cool seeing the visual of the arm hanging there. There were so many times that this movie was almost graphic and then just wouldn't show it. Like, first off the bat, you see this guy who he's like bleeding out of his neck, and that was a cool practical effect, and you're like, oh, that's more graphic than anything in Mad Max Fury Road. So I'm excited to see kind of what they're doing. Well, like, where are we going with this? Is this a hard rated R movie or something, very graphic? And then until that arm dangling with the blood out of it, every other would-be graphic moment is like either looked away from or covered by dust, or something prevents us from seeing it, and it's just such a letdown. It's like we went from these 2 cool moments to just everything being dodged and avoided, and it's like, okay, that's lame. So yeah, no, not a good movie. It's really genuinely not. And like I said, I already thought the first one of the new ones was very overhyped. I almost said mad overhyped. That would have been funny. But this one, the fact that this has like an 8.1 and an 80% on Metacritic, it's one of those things that it makes me lose a little bit of faith in humanity and film, because it's like, how is this the kind of movie that's getting good reviews? Are movies that bad now? I don't think so. I'm constantly defending cinema and going, there's still good movies being released every year. It's just people aren't seeing them. And I guess just so many people aren't seeing them that when they see this, they think it's good. It's objectively bad. I don't use that term very often talking about art, because I firmly believe that art is subjective. And I think that there's a lot of good movies that I don't like. But to me, if you like this movie and you try to tell me that this movie is good, I will no longer value your opinion on movies. I won't, because to me, this movie is genuinely bad. And if you're saying it's good, it's either because you don't know what you're talking about, or you're just buying into hype needlessly, just freely saying, oh, well, everybody else says it's good, so therefore it must be. Because I don't see how else you could come away from this movie thinking it's good. It is not. This is terrible. If it was just boring, okay, give it a 5, give it a 6 or whatever. But it was boring, it was stupid, there's no interesting characters, no interesting plot points, completely unnecessary. Like, it made me like the last one less because of how it led in. Like, Furiosa was a mysterious character, now she's not. I don't care about her as much now in the last movie, therefore making that last movie not as good. Also, that villain, like I said, really cool in the first one, he's kind of mysterious. In this one, he looks kind of lame, like he doesn't do anything interesting. And also he's got sons named Scrotus and Erectus or something, which is just so painfully stupid. Like, really? What are we doing? This feels like a comedy. It feels like a parody of itself. And I just, yeah, I can't I can't recommend it in any way. Also, like I said, how silly and cheesy it was. Like, I was sitting in disbelief. If I wasn't planning on reviewing this movie, I would have walked out of the theater within the first 5 minutes. Not exaggerating. Within the first 5 minutes, I had to start fighting the urge to get up and leave because it was so silly and so cheesy and so poorly filmed and edited. I couldn't believe my eyes. Like I said, not the biggest fan of Fury Road in the world. I'm really not. But that one, I understand why people love it. That's where I'm like, okay, that movie objectively is good. It is. Even if I don't like it that much. I think it's good, not great. But I would give it a 7 because objectively, I think there's a lot of merit to it. This one has none of that. None of those positive qualities at all. It really doesn't. And it's thriving simply off of having whatever cool remnants left over from the last one. And it doesn't succeed as a movie on its own to me. It's not good. It really is not. So that's what I think. If you disagree, I'm really curious why. Like I said, I cannot comprehend anybody genuinely having a good reason for liking this movie. I can't. It's bad to me. But if you have a good reason, I would love to hear it. I'm curious what you think. Also, if you can understand and commiserate with me, please do. Because right now I feel so alone in the world. Because like I said, 8.1 on IMDb, 80% on Metacritic. That has to change, right? It has to, right? I don't know. The first one still has 90% on Metacritic and an 8 point something. Doesn't deserve it, but like I said, it's a lot closer to deserving it than this one does. So, anyway, I'm tired. I have a headache. I've got another movie to see today, so I'm going to go do that. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye. Jesus.